that even though the topic is sexism in the esports industry, that's because that's my little world and I can examine this little petri dish and I can try and figure out what's going on and experiment and look at different angles. But let's be real, it's really not sexism in the esports industry. That's just a cross-section of life. It's sexism in life and society in itself, right? The more women and men you get together, the more types and nature of friction and points of conflict you are going to have between those men and women. And by the way, between men and men over how women are treated and women over how men treat women and how women treat men. There's going to be friction all over the place just because of differences which have to either be bridged or understood, hopefully. And finally, a final caveat to make that I want to make before we get into this topic is I'm not about controlling other people's behavior and personal liberty. I'm more interested in understanding them and then hopefully finding the really significant areas where action must be taken on a literal physical level or pressure must be placed, and then hopefully just dissuading less significant and not that negative behavior in terms of my own personal experiences to therefore create what I would consider a healthier, more cohesive, better industry that's going to be more fun and more productive for all of us to work in. But the point is we're talking about discouraging sexism, and that's where it just makes people think, it's just horrible. Oh, I'm being treated differently because I'm a woman. Oh, I'm not going to get as far. I can't get as far. I should expect this from men, that people are going to behave that way. That's another key element of sexism. So let's talk about these, shall we? Let's start with prohibitive, which is the really, really important one because it literally puts up walls that block people. It denies women the opportunities. So first and foremost, I would say from talking to women, the main type of prohibitive sexism seems to be typecasting. So that's the notion that women can only be hosts or interviewers, which, by the way, I can tell you from knowing people like Pansy, Shocks, I mean, I guess Shocks does do that, but actually she was a journalist as well, Froskurin, who's an amazing analyst. It's absolutely not the case that women can only be hosts or interviewers. So let's just get that out of the way at the beginning. Obviously not. There's obviously women who can be skilled in any area of life. It doesn't matter if somehow you could show, as has been shown in the past, that in general women don't like or aren't as good at certain STEM subjects, for example. There will obviously always be some women who are amazing at STEM subjects and are better than, let's say, the majority of men. That's the point. The differences within sex and gender groups are going to actually be bigger than necessarily directly just between the sex and gender groups. That's another study and finding that has been repeated again and again, but is always suppressed by people with a certain agenda. So no, it's obviously ridiculous, the notion that women can only be hosts or interviewers, but that is an area within esports in the industry that I've been told sometimes is a prevalent thinking or paradigm, which in that sense, yeah, it's nonsense. When she says there, it's not that there aren't no women, or aren't any women that do well at esports. Actually, there are very, very few women who are competing at a pro level in esports or doing well in esports, in contrast to the total number of players, the vast majority of which are men, especially competing in a professional manner, fashion or demeanor, like putting in the same hours, attempting to give up your whole life, all social aspects to compete in the same way, being willing to move to other countries. Most are even the ones who are competing at a professional level, most of them are choosing to not compete in normal top tournaments because they are distracted competing in woman-only, female-only tournaments, which by definition, by the way, are sexist and discriminatory. There are no such tournaments, to my knowledge, in the history of esports or currently in esports, in which women are prohibited from competing. There's no such thing as male tournaments. They're all open tournaments. Any woman who has the relative access to the qualifier can attempt to qualify for any male tournament except an invite-only tournament. Now, there are women's tournaments, and actually, only women can compete in them. If you are a man and you're the best man in the world, you attempt to apply to compete, you will be told you cannot compete. That is sexism and discrimination. Now, no one's bothered by that. No one gives a flying fuck in esports, quite frankly. The tournaments in which the men compete in are much, much better with better prize money and a higher level of competition. So nobody particularly wants to compete in the women's tournaments anyway. But the women are not competing in the same overall field because when they do, they fail overwhelmingly. So let's just state this overall at the beginning so people understand the concept here. Women make more salary than men of equal skill and experience. They win more prize money due to female-only tournaments than men of equal skill and experience. They get more press and exposure, as seen in articles like this, than men of equal skill and experience. They get higher streaming numbers and therefore possibility to brand themselves than men of equal skill and experience. They have better sponsorships and are in better teams than men of equal skill and experience. And they consistently perform significantly worse, on average, than men of the exact same level of skill and experience, and therefore often don't even compete at the same level as men of a similar skill and experience, and go and choose to go and isolate themselves, segregate themselves into sexist, discriminatory, female-only tournaments. Now, personally, I don't really consider those sexist and discriminatory. They are by definition. I just think it's cool that there are exhibition tournaments that women can compete in, so they have a chance to play, because guess what? I think it's cool that some women like to play games and that the best of them can still compete against each other, even though that most of them, the overwhelming majority, a negligible amount can compete against the top men. The majority cannot, and therefore they would just never be seen and have any exposure if they only competed in open tournaments. Also, as I've mentioned many times, to men who get angry about there being female-only tournaments and the fact that, oh, I'm as good as that woman and I'd beat her. Yes, but the point here is that's totally separate money that comes into the industry from sponsors like Intel, who want to sponsor women's tournaments and highlight women's gaming and give them something to aspire to. And so that's not money that would be in the open male tournament, as I dub it. It's money that just wouldn't exist in esports. So you know what? The more money in esports, the more tournaments in esports, the more opportunities for people to compete. Generally, I think it's a net positive. I think it's a sum positive for the scene, for the industry, and obviously for women who want to compete in esports. I think that's quite cool, actually. Now, what's ridiculous about this is, first of all, as I pointed out, the actual meme about women playing support is the e-girl meme, right? It's the idea that they all play support because it's easy, it's less mechanically intensive, you can get carried in the bot lane by the AD carry. And the other part of the meme, the key element, of course, is that not only do they play support, considered more of a feminine role in terms of how people want to make stereotypes, because, you know, it's more caring, you're looking after someone, you're supporting their efforts, you're making them succeed. You know, traditional gender roles, I guess people would define this as a bit bizarre that we're going this deep on fucking games. Like, well, okay. The meme isn't complete there, is it? It's not just that they play support. It's always that, well, they play support also because it has a lot of female champions that play support, right? Like Nami, like Lulu, like Janna. You go back in time far enough, Lux, etc. Plenty of support champions that are female, right? The meme is also that women like to play cutesy champions or female champions. They like to play as a woman in a game. Not even that ridiculous a concept when you consider that actually a lot of ideologues in the modern day imply that actually representation is a very important quality. So, for example, an African-American person needs an African-American person in the movie to watch, to identify with. A Native American person needs a Native American character, Indian rather, in the movie to be able to identify with. So that's the logic that they're going with here. And yet, bizarrely, when by the meme, by the stereotype, women do that, somehow, if you point that out, that's bad in that particular case, even though it's getting women to play the game, and we're supposed to deny the reality of it. Yet in the very same logic, elsewhere in society, we're told that this happens, and in fact, it's important, because that means that people have something to look to and they can relate to, and that's going to make them interested in that activity. So which is it, right? You can't have it both ways. You can't gaslight the fuck out of us in both directions, and basically just say, well, whichever one I go with at this moment's right, but you're wrong. Whichever, even if you repeat the same logic, you're wrong. The rules itself say that this particular aspect of pick ban and what your comp ends up being are not going to be considered when you're determining whether the competitive integrity has been violated. So actually, competitive integrity angle doesn't even work for this ruling. And also, if you want to talk about competitive integrity, that you're supposed to play at your best at all times and you're supposed to show fair play and honesty, do you think it's fair and honest and has competitive integrity for the Invictus to take 5 diamond players who are all support players, a couple of them off-rolling, and have 4 of them role swap to other roles they've never played before, largely, and have them play at a professional level in the top Russian league? No. In fact, what's interesting, I saw people making this comment, so I can't verify it, but it certainly seems to add to the circumstances that supposedly the reason why the Invictus has done this, removed the lineup that got them into the LCL and was playing in the Open Cup last month, is because the Invictus Esports apparently, allegedly, wants to sell their team and it didn't go through. And so as a result, they've decided instead, let's get some PR. Let's get a little bit of pop-off. Let's have a scandal, right? So what we'll do is we'll put in these 5 female players, including our fucking manager, who are all diamond, and we'll make that the kind of gimmick, right? Hey, we've got all these female players. Hey, the first female team in the LCL. And so what happened to this team after that? Well, let's go and have a look, shall we? Oh, what's that? This is a team that has lost all 3 of their games, 2 of them being the ones that teams are now getting actually punished for what they've done against them. So that seems pretty fucking ridiculous, right? So then we've got the whole line, no one feels worse about this than I do. Now, I get it that she's just an idiot, just saying some platitude that she hasn't even thought about whatsoever, and it's just some glib statement. But the way that sounds is so narcissistic, it's unreal. It's like you've managed to make this about you and your feelings when you're the one who's fucking shit up for everyone else in your surroundings, but it's about you and how you feel. And by the way, I'm going to go ahead and guess. I don't care what Dardoch says, but when you say, no one feels worse about this than I do, how do you know? How do you know Dardoch inside doesn't feel like that? Or have you talked to him, have you? Would that make it? If he says something, are you supposed to trust his words but not yours when you say them? Like, what a ridiculous thing. Why do they make this about yourself and about how you feel? Fuck off. Be a professional president and actually address the public in a professional manner. I don't give a fuck about your feelings. Save that for your journal, love. So then we get to the part where, think about the way, again, she's addressed the whole thing. Did you hear anything about that conflict of interest in that? No. She still doesn't get that this is a conflict of interest and thus doesn't address it here at all. So think about this. Why do her fans from TSM get a different set of remarks to the general public anyway? Why was the initial Reddit thing just like, well, I fucked up and it went this way, and so, it's just the way it is, right? And then now we get this apology to the community. This is before it was just an unfortunate mistake. Now it's an apology to the community and TSM fans in this trying time. That you're the one making it fucking trying, by the way. I know you mean obviously the whole lockdown situation around the world, but you're making it way more trying than that is in this scenario. Otherwise, TSM fans were loving some of these moves. So now we get into societal and social pressures. And the notion is that they stop women being allowed into teams. Now that's a problem. It's one thing if they say society means that women in general don't tend to gravitate. That's one thing, because that's society. It's not about esports specifically. But the implication in some of these articles, such as the BBC one, is that there's direct discrimination. These women are good enough or would be good enough, and that they're not allowed into male teams. Now, here's an area where we can isolate an aspect where there couldn't be any social pressure and show that this is provably not been that it has not been proven as an assertion or even in any vague way backed up at all. Which is, I can think of 2 examples where women could play and based on their own skill level show that they're at a pro level before playing in pro teams where they could be blocked in theory if this existed, this discrimination, this patriarchal instinct. So those would be, in CSGO, we have FPL, the Face It Pro League, and in League of Legends, we have solo queue. Now, the reason I bring these 2 examples up is, let's go with the CSGO one first. In Face It Pro League, if you are skilled enough, sure, when you talk on the mic, men will know you are a woman, but in theory, you are playing with different male pros all the time. Or people just at the pro level. So as a result, even if 1 or 2 didn't like you, or someone was biased against you, as long as your skill level was good enough, you could get into FPL, and then you could just play there. And sure, you might not be on a pro team, and someone might not want you on a pro team, who knows about that? But you could show off that your raw skill was good enough. Now, I actually went out there, and I asked other pro players, are there women who are getting into FPL? Is this the case? No, they said it's not the case. That's just not happening. There's very rarely been anyone who was even close. And in general, they're not even going for it as a massive goal. It's not like something they're driven for and they're practicing for. It's just not happening. Now in solo queue, here's another one. Because in solo queue, particularly in League of Legends, they do not have voice chat. So as long as your name does not give away your gender, so you could be named a string of numbers, A178588920, with letters and numbers. No one could tell what gender that is. You could play, and like everyone else in solo queue, remember, there's Chinese players have come on to NA and just played solo queue without even being able to type much English and gotten high up in solo queue. If you were good enough just in terms of the raw game, you could get into Challenger in solo queue without revealing that you were a woman, just on the basis of your own skill level, and therefore start to make a case or your claim that you're good enough to be playing on a pro level, or that you actually are being discriminated against. Now, this is not the case. Now, when people say, but the problem is it's not fair, there's too few girls playing. That's because, in general, girls do not like esports games as much as men. This is the fact at the moment. The evidence all points to this right now. Girl gamers seem to be totally in denial of this. They purposely, and what's funny is they'll cite stats when they're very general, like there's 51% of women in gaming, but then when you ask them about stats
of girls and how good they are at games based on the ranks and all the actual metrics that we have, then suddenly they don't want to know about wide stats. They want to go with outliers. But you say girls aren't as good as men in gaming, but there's this one girl who would beat most of the people watching this video. So what? What's the relevance of that when we're talking about generalities of all the gender and how they're competing in the game? So a lot of girl gamers even are in denial of the fact that a lot of girls do not like games. I mean, a lot of the pro gamers who are pros, as in salaried and playing in female-only tournaments, winning, who are girl gamers, themselves don't seem to like the game as much, don't want to play as much, aren't as driven, and yet they're in denial of it themselves, and that's why they put it all onto everyone else. Oh, it's you guys being sexist against me, or I've never been accepted by the male community, all these sorts of things.
Give me a message for this show, Miss Harvey. What would you like people to hear who are open and they want to know what you think about something?
Well, basically that I'm tired of being portrayed as a victim within the even the community and the mainstream medias, and that I do believe that it starts with yourself. Like I was mentioning earlier, you can make a difference in your daily life and just focus on yourself. And if you're a woman and want to compete, I think it's worth it, and I want to see more women within the community because I do believe that diversity makes us stronger, which is very political to say it, but
everything she said before that was so good. Just listen to the other part. Okay, Ray Queen, tell me what your message is.
My message is that we shouldn't argue about the details about, are men better, are women worse, until we have sort of the scientific facts, which we don't have right now. Yeah. And what I would encourage people to do is find female players you enjoy, and I would enjoy the media to profile female players, and not profile female players in the context of being so brave for playing video games, but tell their stories and get people involved, like market female players and get people involved in their stories, and make it a more appealing scene. And I think we'll see more women show up, and I think we'll see our first truly co-ed elite female player in our lifetimes. So all we can do is just try to put a spotlight on the people who are already here, and try not to worry too much about the scientific facts we don't have.
Okay. Mask, what is your message to the world?
I would say at least to the newer generation of female players, because those are the ones that are in question, that if you want to get to the top of the open circuit, don't believe that there's anything in your way but yourself. And you have to take responsibility for your success and make no excuses along the way. Even if those excuses are legitimate, you cannot let them distract you. But on that other side, that if maybe being a professional player or, getting into a STEM field or some male-dominated profession is something that you have really no ambitions to do, don't lie to yourself and say you are, or say that you are interested in those simply because society is forcing you to value these fields. It's counterproductive, and you just end up extremely unhappy in the end with yourself, because when you don't meet those expectations, you're really questioning, it's like, well, how am I going to value myself as a person when society doesn't value the things that I am good at? So not getting into these fields does not make you any less of a person. So go on and keep doing what you love, whether it's gaming or whether you want to be a chef or, a secretary, whatever the case is. It's like, even if what you happen to do is traditionally female dominated, you just need to be honest with yourself, and only from there will, people able to see that, like, hey, maybe we should stop putting an emphasis in these fields when people are simply just not interested in it.
They say no man is an island. We all need people who've got our back, and supporting me and the content on my channel are the following people: Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, The Concept, Animosity, Banediesel, Ben Glass, Jasun, Jensen Goh, Tosh, Toucan, and you know it. Always a special thanks goes up to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Do you want to ask a question for my video AMA? Do you want to take part in one of those lengthy discussions where I talk about whatever topics are on your mind? Do you want teasers, find out who the upcoming guests are, or maybe even to suggest a guest or a topic for my content? If any of those perks or others catch your fancy, well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today, where? In the Patreon link in the description box below.